The knock came at a strange hour, just as dusk slipped into night, and Laura almost ignored it because her house had learned her loneliness and usually stayed quiet at that time, but something about the sound, careful, unsure, yet determined, made her pause, wipe her hands, and walk to the door with a feeling she could not explain, and when she opened it, she found Ethan standing there, rain on his jacket, shoulders tense, eyes older than she remembered, and for a second her mind struggled to place him because the last image she held was of a teenage boy laughing in her kitchen years ago, not this grown man, who carried himself like someone who had rehearsed this moment many times, and he greeted her politely, his voice steady but soft, asking if this was a bad time, and Laura stepped aside without thinking, letting him in as if muscle memory took over, because he was family and because some doors open before the heart can question them, and as he walked inside, she noticed how carefully he moved, as if the room itself mattered, as if a space held weight for him, and they sat in the living room where the lamp cast a warm circle of light that made the outside rain feel far away, and Laura asked simple questions. How long he was in town, how work was going, whether his mother knew he was here, and he answered quickly, too quickly, with short replies that felt practiced, while his eyes wandered to the floor, the window, the framed photos, anywhere but her face, and Laura sensed that this visit was not about catching up, that something deeper pressed against the moment, pushing it forward, and she felt an old instinct rise in her, the one that noticed shifts in tone, the one that listened beyond words, and when Ethan finally looked at her, his expression serious, she felt the air change, as if the room leaned in to listen, and he said her name the way he used to when he was younger, respectful but familiar, and admitted that he hadn't planned this visit properly. That he hadn't called because he didn't know how to explain why he needed to see her, and Laura tried to laugh it off, telling him he was always welcome, but the sound felt thin even to her, because his presence stirred emotions she didn't expect, memories of long talks at the kitchen table, of quiet support during hard years, of being needed in a way that once gave her purpose, and as Ethan spoke, he revealed he had moved back months ago and avoided her on purpose, not out of anger but confusion. And that confession unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, because it suggested distance where she had assumed closeness, and she leaned forward, listening closely, noticing how his hands tightened together as if holding something fragile. And when he paused, searching for words, Laura felt a strange tension settle in her chest, a sense that whatever he was about to say would shift how she saw him and herself, and the rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence he left behind, and in that quiet space, Laura realized she was no longer speaking to a child she once guided, but to a man standing at the edge of a truth he had carried alone for too long, and as he finally began to speak again, his voice lower, more honest, Laura understood that this unexpected visit was not just a family call, or a casual surprise, but the beginning of a conversation that would test boundaries, awaken buried feelings, and challenge the calm order she had built around her life, and even before the words fully left his mouth, she knew this night would stay with her, because some moments announced themselves softly, not with noise or drama, but with a quiet knock and a look that says everything is about to change. Ethan sat forward on the edge of the chair as if staying still would make him lose courage, and Laura noticed how different he seemed now, not just older but heavier inside, carrying thoughts that did not belong to youth anymore, and he began speaking quickly, as if afraid that if he slowed down he would stop altogether, telling her he had moved back to town quietly, rented a small place, started working again, and kept himself busy on purpose, because every familiar street reminded him of her house, her voice, the way she once listened without judgment. And as he spoke, Laura felt a mix of surprise and concern, because she had always believed family ties stayed open even during distance, yet here he was admitting he had avoided her, not out of disrespect but fear, and he explained that when he left years ago, he believed time would erase feelings that made no sense to him, feelings he never chose and never acted on, and Laura's heart tightened as she listened, because his words were careful, respectful, and painfully honest, and he made it clear that nothing improper had ever happened, that she had only ever been kind, steady, safe, but kindness itself had left a mark on him during years when his life felt unstable, and he confessed that growing up had not erased that mark, but sharpened it, forcing him to question himself, his emotions, and his Silence, and Laura felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders even though she had done nothing wrong, because she understood how easily care could turn into attachment when someone felt unseen elsewhere, and Ethan continued, saying he spent years telling himself it was admiration, gratitude, nostalgia, anything but what it slowly revealed itself to be, and the honesty in his voice made Laura look away for a moment, not out of rejection, but because she needed space to breathe, and he noticed, lowering his tone, assuring her again that he was not there to ask for anything, not to disrupt her life or place her in an impossible position, but simply to speak the truth aloud so it would stop living only inside him. And Laura felt a quiet ache form, because she recognized the courage it took to face someone and admit confusion instead of hiding behind distance. And as he spoke about sleepless nights, about replaying conversations from years ago, about wondering if speaking now was selfish or necessary, she realized that this visit was not driven by desire, but by a need for peace, and the room felt heavy with unspoken emotion as she absorbed his words, understanding that sometimes the hardest feelings are the ones that never cross a line, but still demand to be acknowledged, and Ethan admitted that avoiding her had hurt more than seeing her would have, that silence had grown heavier with time, and that walking through her door tonight felt like stepping into a storm he was finally ready to face. And Laura studied his face, seeing not longing alone, but relief mixed with fear, and she understood that this moment mattered not because of what could happen, but because of what was being released. And as Ethan finally stopped speaking, his breath uneven, Laura realized that part 2 of this unexpected visit was not about romance acted upon, but about truth spoken at last, about a young man choosing honesty over hiding, and about her being asked to hold that truth gently without letting it reshape the lines that kept both of them safe. And in that quiet pause after his confession, Laura knew that whatever came next would require calm, clarity, and strength, because once words like these were spoken, they could not be taken back, only understood and placed carefully where they belonged. Laura stood up slowly, not because she wanted to escape the moment, but because she needed movement to think clearly, and she walked toward the window where the rain traced thin lines down the glass, giving her something steady to look at while her thoughts raced, and she spoke carefully, choosing words that would not hurt, but would not confuse either, telling Ethan that feelings could exist without being acted on, that some emotions arrived without permission and still had to be guided with care. And Ethan listened without interrupting, his face serious, accepting, as if he already knew what she would say and needed to hear it anyway. And Laura turned back to him and explained that life had taught her how fragile lines could be, how easily moments could grow into regrets if wisdom was ignored, and she shared pieces of her own truth, admitting that there were years when her marriage felt empty, when she felt unseen and quietly lonely, and that during those times his respect and kindness had reminded her that she mattered, not as something romantic, but as a person worthy of attention. And Ethan absorbed this with surprise and understanding, realizing that the connection he felt was not imagined, but still not meant to change shape. And Laura made it clear that acknowledgement did not mean permission, that honesty did not erase responsibility, and that caring for someone sometimes meant choosing distance over closeness. And the room filled with a calm sadness rather than tension, because both of them understood this was not a rejection of truth, but a protection of it. And Ethan nodded, saying he never wanted to cross a line or create confusion, only to stop carrying a secret that weighed on him. And Laura saw relief soften his face as he spoke, as if the burden he carried was finally being set down, and she reassured him that he had not done anything wrong by feeling deeply, that emotions alone did not define character, choices did, and she thanked him for trusting her enough to speak honestly instead of letting silence turn into distance forever. And as they talked, the rain outside eased, mirroring the shift inside the room, and Ethan admitted that hearing her calm response helped him accept what he already knew, that some connections were real but not meant to move forward. And Laura agreed, saying that not every strong feeling was meant to become a story lived out loud. Some existed to teach, to shape, to be released. And when Ethan stood to leave, there was no urgency, only a quiet understanding between them. And Laura felt a mix of pride and sorrow watching him gather himself with dignity, knowing he had faced something difficult and chosen honesty over confusion. And as he reached the door, he thanked her again, not with hope or expectation, but with gratitude, and Laura responded with warmth and firmness, reminding him that he mattered, that his future was wide and open, and that this moment did not define him but freed him. And when the door closed behind him, the house felt still but not empty, and Laura stood there for a long moment, reflecting on how clarity often came through uncomfortable truths. And she understood that part 3 of this night was not about heartbreak alone but about strength, about two people choosing wisdom over impulse, and about the quiet courage it took to honor feelings without letting them cross into places they did not belong. And even though the conversation left a soft ache in her chest, Laura knew it also left her with peace, because boundaries had been spoken clearly, respect had been preserved, and what could have become confusion had instead become understanding, leaving both of them steadier than before. After the door closed behind Ethan, the house felt different, not louder or emptier, but thoughtful, as if the walls themselves were holding on to what had just been said. And Laura stayed where she was for a moment, hand resting on the door frame, breathing slowly, letting the weight of the evening settle without pushing it away, because she knew rushing past emotions only made them return stronger later. And she walked back into the living room, turned off one lamp, then another, leaving only a soft glow that matched her mood, and she sat down, replaying the night not with regret, but with clarity, recognizing how rare it was for someone to choose honesty without demand, truth without pressure. And she realized that Ethan's visit had not taken something from her but given her understanding about herself, about the quiet loneliness she had carried for years without naming it, about the way kindness can echo longer than we expect, and about how being seen, even briefly, can awaken parts of the heart that still live and feel deeply. And she thought about the strength it took for Ethan to speak and the strength it took for both of them to stop where wisdom required, and instead of feeling shaken, she felt grounded, because boundaries had held firm without cruelty, and respect had guided every word. And as the night deepened, Laura made tea and stood by the window again, watching the streetlights reflect on wet pavement, understanding that life often gives moments that do not continue but still matter, moments that close a chapter quietly instead of loudly. And days passed, and the memory of that evening softened, not fading, but settling into something reflective. And Laura noticed small changes in herself, how she walked with a little more awareness, how she spoke with more confidence, how she no longer felt invisible in her own life, because the conversation had reminded her that she still carried value beyond roles and expectations. And then one afternoon, while sorting mail, her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, simple and calm, thanking her again for listening, saying he felt lighter, clearer, ready to move forward. And she smiled gently, replying with encouragement, wishing him peace and happiness without hesitation. And when she set the phone down, she felt no lingering tension, only warmth, because closure had been reached without damage. And Laura understood that maturity was not about denying feelings, but placing them where they belonged. And as weeks turned into months, the memory of the unexpected knock became a quiet marker in her life, a reminder that emotional truth can arrive without warning and leave behind growth if handled with care. And she carried that lesson into her days, into conversations, into her own healing, knowing that some stories are not meant to continue, but still deserve to be told once, honestly and gently. And on certain evenings, when the house grew quiet again, Laura would sit with the calm instead of fighting it, understanding that her heart had been tested and had chosen wisely. And she felt proud of that choice, because not every emotional moment is about pursuit. Some are about release. And as she looked ahead, she felt open rather than closed, steady rather than shaken, and grateful that when the unexpected had arrived, she had met it with grace, leaving the night not as a source of regret, but as a reminder that emotional courage, when guided by respect and restraint, can bring peace instead of chaos. And that sometimes the most powerful endings are the ones that quietly return you to yourself, stronger, clearer, and ready for whatever comes next.